Good morning everybody, it is a Sunday morning, it is belting down with rain, it is southwest Scotland. The last 2 days have been, in fact all week has been pretty good, pretty good, but unfortunately the end has come. Apparently the remains of some horrible hurricane which was over in America, come over the Atlantic, and now it's all over Britain and of course on top of the north of Europe, so it's pretty crap. So anyway, I just thought I'd deal with something which has been bugging my brains for, well, probably ever since I ever heard the story. I think already you know what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the story about Jonah and the whale, a story hard to swallow, because even when I was a Jehovah's Witness, I really struggled with the whole Jonah story. It just didn't seem to make any sense. It just sounded that maybe, just maybe, it was just a lot of bollocks. And I didn't realise, and I'm not going to watch it all because I find them so tedious, but there was even, I believe last year, somehow I missed out on this one, that the witnesses even dedicated a whole drama on Jonah. So I just find it extraordinary. I find it extraordinary. I'm not going to watch the drama because they do me head in. But I just find it extraordinary that even now, that this story about Jonah and the whale has been kept going as something that literally happened. Now, when we leave Jehovah's Witnesses, I've said this before, but we all sort of, pat ourselves on the back, to go over something, because we come to a realisation that it was a complete lot of nonsense, and that we were conditioned, that we were misled, that we were brainwashed, that we didn't have our own logical thinking, and we were believing what somebody else had told us through the merits of the written word. And that formed our opinion on life, the universe and everything. And there's a phrase now that ex-witnesses uses. It's when you're in the witnesses, you are in the truth. When you leave the witnesses, you become awake. The thing is though, are the people who've left Jehovah's Witnesses really awake? Have they really awoken out of a sort of a dreamlike state and then closed their eyes again and gone into another dreamlike state? Are they really truly awake? Well, in fact, this story of Jonah is something which bears thinking about it in relation to that point. So what I'm going to do is, because I've said this several times before, I don't have a Bible or anything biblical, scriptural, or that sense, whence I left behind in a former life when I moved down here. So I got rid of all the books I'd had for years and years and years. Even after I packed in the witnesses, I still had them up, I think, 5 years in various boxes. I just thought, even though I'd left, I thought it was nonsense, I just thought, how can I get rid of all these books? And when I moved down here, basically all the books, all the witnessy books in the little boxes, I think they went in a dump. I know they're not here. They were in my attic, and they were in the attic for several years. So I don't know where they went. So including all the Bibles, including Bibles I had for years. The different various Bibles that the witnesses gave. The black one, the red one, the special release version with stripes on it, with my name inside, I might even put my school class, Terry Harrop, 3C or whatever it is. Anyway, so I've got no Bible, so in other words I have to print off one of these here. So I'm going to read from this here, and we'll crack on this. And then we're going to go to an article which was I've just recently found in the Wake of 1981, which shows that, which actually is the same point I was thinking, which is discussing it. So I'm going to read this after reading this. It's only short. The whole story of Jonah, I'm not going to go into what happened post vomiting. I'm just going to get to we're going to stop at the vomit. Once we've reached the vomit, we're going to stop. So we'll crack on up to the vomit, and then we're not going to deal with the whole sackcloth and ashes, the plant and all that, because that's a whole new sphere of nonsense. But anyway, let's deal with this. So, the word of the Lord came to Jonah the son of Amittai, and it was, go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. It's a bit odd, because of course Nineveh wasn't a city the people in the city had no special relationship with God anyway. I don't understand why it was upsetting him so much. You know, the descendants weren't the descendants of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. So I'm a bit confused of why. I believe it's an Assyrian city who had their own gods. You know, why is God even bothered what they do in Nineveh? You know, when he got the Israelites to go into the promised land, it was just like, right, city there, don't worship me, just go in and plunder, take them for slaves, you know, kill everybody, all the men, all the women and children, take for slaves. I just don't understand what his beef was against the city of Nineveh. And somehow he wanted this guy to go into this city. Can you imagine this? They all believe in their own different gods, they've got their own king, and he's supposed to go in there and convince a city of probably thousands of people that unless you turn around and repent and sort of believe in the God that you've never heard of before, you're all going to be killed. It's really odd. No wonder Jonah just felt a little out of his depth, and no wonder Jonah thought, why? What's going on here, God? Why do you care? What's the point in this? Because you're not going to have a special covenant with these people anyway, because they're not even Jews. So what's the script? Why are you bothered? Really, really odd. You know, it's very odd. The whole premise of why he's going there in the first place, it makes no sense. So he goes, he says he wants them to go. And Jonah, typical of a lot of people in the Bible, has all of a sudden suffers from that frailty that we have as humans of being scared. You know, all the way through the Bible, there are examples of people who became overawed and scared and fearful. And we know this is what happened prior to the Jews and the Israelites going into the promised land. The spies went out, they came back with reports of giants. You know, the biggest, you know, bunch of grapes you've ever seen in your life, took two blokes to bring it in at. And they become scared and fearful, as you normally would. And then Jehovah God, obviously being a God of tender, loving kindness and mercy, wanted to kill them all on the spot. And of course, Moses had to say, oh God, remember Jehovah, you're a loving God. Or what would people say if you took them all out of Egypt and then you put them to death, you know, in the wilderness? What would these, you know, without bringing reproach on your name? And God thought, flipping it, Moses, you've got a point. Why didn't I think of that? After all, I am God. Anyway, so let's crack on with this. So this is the same sort of scenario. So Jonah got fearful. So he ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. And he went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. He went down to Joppa and found a ship bound for that port. So I'm a bit confusing because I think Tarshish is supposed to be Spain. So he went down to Joppa to get a boat to Spain. Why Spain? You know, it's just, you know, where he is. You know, so this, you know, down this here, that's one side. Why he could have gone anywhere else? He could have run away several places, but why is he going to Spain? Don't know why he preferred Spain. I don't know. Beaches. I don't know. Maybe he was looking forward to the tapas. Maybe he couldn't get the tapas menu round about Nineveh. Maybe Nineveh didn't do tapas, and he wanted to go to Spain to experience the full tapas menu. Anyway, so he's off to Spain. So he's on this boat. So anyway, after paying the fare, as you do, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. So he's basically, so God said to Jonah, go to Nineveh, and then and of course it goes the opposite way. I'm going that way. So anyway, so then the Lord, as you do, and God's good at this because God likes to use the elements. You know, you use the elements, as we know in the plagues which hit Egypt, and he used the elements to full effect, as we know, in the Great Flood, when he committed the greatest act of animal cruelty we've ever known by killing every living creature on this earth, even though they weren't deserved a death. Except for the ones that were in the ark, you know. So literally billions of creatures died, drowned. Oh, you know, this is the God of loving kindness and mercy. Don't forget that, folks. He is the God of loving kindness and mercy. Why? Because he tells us so. So anyway, so here we go. So basically, there's a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. So let's think about this. This must have been a horrific storm, and the Mediterranean has been known to have them. You know, the Med, even though it's, you know, it's quite calm, but yet the Med does get these horrific storms, and you can believe that the scenario here. A little wooden ship, you know, probably, I don't know, did it even have quarters below? I don't know. If you think about the Viking ships years on, which, you know, went round, you know, into the Atlantic, the English Channel, and even into the Mediterranean, you know, there were a lot of oars on top, and everybody slept on top. So I'm not too sure here. So maybe there was a secondary level. I don't really know. I don't know how big this ship was, and maybe there was a secondary level. And the storm is that bad that they think this boat is going to break up. So you can just imagine the waves are hitting this thing. You know, the boat is getting, the boat must be doing this. You know, literally it is doing this. The waves are hitting it. There's bits flying over there. People are holding on to, you know, for grim life here. They put their arms around, roping themselves round the mast. You know, roping themselves to keep steady. You can imagine the scenario. It must be horrific. You know, it must be absolutely. It must be frightening. And it's that frightening. It says here that all the sailors, not just one or two who are a bit pessimistic Joes going, you know what, I don't think we're going to make this one. All the sailors were absolutely, you know, they were basically shitting their pants here. All the sailors were afraid. They were all afraid, and each cried out to his own God. So each different, you know, guys, is what they do. What this, again, as I mentioned before, the problem with humans, when the going gets tough, the tough get praying to whichever God they wanted. You know, we can't be saved. Let's go. Let's appeal now to the invisible guys in the sky. Each one had their own gods, and all going, you know, whatever. Him and him, you know, and, you know, just, you know, crying out loud, please save us, whichever God from nation, because probably the boat was made up as different people from different nations or different tribes or that shit. So anyway, it says here, and they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. So at this point, as you do, you know, all the cargo is going into the sea. That's all the cargo. All the cargo through into the sea. That's all the food, probably all the provisions, because it's a bit of a journey from where they are to get to Spain anyway. So a lot of provisions, a lot of cargo, maybe stuff they were hoping to sell. Everything's gone into the sea. Well, everything probably fell in the sea anyway. If the boat has been doing that, it's all pretty flown in the sea. It's probably, if it all went to one side, the ship would be in danger of capsizing if all the weight to one side of the ship. So good idea is throw everything overboard to try and keep the boat, you know, a little bit more buoyant, and everybody stand in the middle like this. So anyway, so this is a scenario. It's pretty bad. It's worse than the Titanic, this one. So it's pretty bad. So where's Jonah? So while this is happening, right, while this life and death scenario is playing out on this boat, where these guys are crying, they're fearful for their life, they think the boat's going to be broken up, they're having to chuck their cargo over the side, where is our man Jonah? What's Jonah doing at this point? But Jonah had gone below deck, so clearly on this boat there was a below deck, and I would have thought below deck would have been even worse. I would have thought below deck, anything below deck would have been really side to side to side to side, up and down, boom, boom, boom. Anyway, anybody below deck was at this point probably went from one side of the boat to the other side of the boat. They probably hit the head off the roof, then they fell to the bottom. You know, it must have been, if you're in that part of the boat, it must have been really, really awful. But Jonah gone down below deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. Right. So, in other words, let's at this point pick a hole in this story. You know, whenever we look at the Bible and we look at stories, and we haven't even got to this whale bit, and already we're into the land of make-believe. We have a man here, well, the boat's potentially going to break up. While it's been tossed from, you know, up, down, side to side, where all the sailors are crying out to their different gods, while they've thrown all their cargo overboard, our man Jonah went below deck and catching, you know, 40 winks. It is just utter nonsense. How could he even sleep? It's, you know, all of a sudden we're into the land of make-believe. All of a sudden you notice, you know what? Maybe this story isn't true. Maybe this is just a lot of nonsense. Maybe, you know, for effectiveness, we'll put in that Jonah's fast asleep. Because if you do that, it makes him appear that maybe you can see why the other sailors thought, how can this guy sleep when potentially we're all going to lose our lives? In fact, that's the very point. The captain, aye, captain, the captain went down to him and said, how can you sleep? You know, while getting slapped on by a big fish. Well, not a big fish, but, you know, a fish slaps him on the, you know, Captain Birdseye. You know, while things are flying, he's gone below deck, things are flying everywhere. And he's looking at Jonah here, who amazingly has managed to stay in his little bunk without falling off it. He says, how can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us so that we will not perish. So in other words, Captain goes downstairs, notices Jonah's deep in sleep and says, how can you sleep? Why don't you join with us? You pray to your own God and maybe he'll listen to you, because all the rest of the gods here are not listening to us. Then the sailors said to each other, come on, let us cast lots to find out who's responsible for this calamity. Now this is really odd here, because again, now we're back into the land of make-believe yet again, because as I've said before, the Mediterranean is known for storms. In fact, the Mediterranean is full of wrecks, thousands of them, going back thousands of years, and they've been sunk by storms. You know, it's not as though they were sailing across a lake, a calm lake, which has never been known to have a storm before. You know, it wasn't the case that they're in the Mediterranean, which is known to have storms, but for some bizarre reason, everybody in this boat believes that somebody is responsible for this calamity, that this storm is otherworldly. It isn't of what they usually get in the Mediterranean, because everybody knows if you go on a boat in the Mediterranean that, you know, there's no sinkings or anything. A lot of nonsense. Even big ships have gone down in the Mediterranean, you know, in more recent times because of the storms. There's people at the moment who are trying to leave North Africa and try to get to Sicily and Malta, and they've been lost at sea because of the bad weather in the Mediterranean. You know, and they're not blaming gods or whatever it is. It happens. And these sailors would have known that, yes, this is another storm, and, well, that's it, you know, we'll just have to ride this one out. But apparently somebody's to blame here. So they cast lots. How is this happening? How are they casting lots? They've thrown everything over the ship, so there's nothing left. What are they casting lots with? I've no idea. And how are they doing this? You can imagine the waves are crashing in. Can they even hear each other? Hey, how are they even having a conversation? It doesn't make any sense. But anyway, let's crack on with this. It's just a lot of nonsense. So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. Surprise, surprise. Wouldn't it be funny if the lots had fallen on some bloke called Jimmy? You know, Jimmy the I don't know, the Persian. You know, what would happen if it fallen Jimmy? You know, and Jimmy would have gone, oh shit, is it my fault? Christ. So anyway, so they asked him, you know, this is remarkable. How is this conversation ever happening? You know, how you know, literally, I don't know if you've ever been on a boat and there's been a storm. You can't have a conversation. Literally, it's just, you know, I'm just shouting to people's ears. But anyway, so apparently they're having this conversation. The boat's threatening to break up, right? They're all huddled together. They're having a conversation, as you do. So they say, so they ask him, Jonah, oh, Jonah, come here. Come here, let's just sit here. We've just done the lots. We're calmly sitting down here in a little group, a group huddle. We're having a little convo here, even though the boat's about to break up. We're getting cast 30 foot in the air, 30 foot down, 10 foot there, 10 foot this way. There's fish flying over, there's war coming in here. I'm roped to the mast here. But anyway, let's have a conversation. So and he says, tell us, who is responsible for making all this trouble for us? What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you? Well, that's an expansive list, isn't it? The ship's about to break up, right? Lots have fallen on this guy called Jonah, who's just a passenger on the ship. He probably went on the ship with just his staff. You know, so he's just got on the boat. He's packed lightly. He's packed lightly. He hasn't even got one of those small cases that you go into Ryanair jets and put. He hasn't even got cabin luggage. All he's got is probably his staff, right? So anyway, he's travelling very, very lightly. So all of a sudden they're all in this group huddle on the boat, which is about to break up at any second now. So they're asking us, who's responsible for making this trouble for us? So maybe you're God. What kind of work do you do? Okay, I'll tell you what. Well, I'll tell you what. So Jonah sits down and says, well, what kind of work do you do? Well, what would you? I spent, a good few years. I was looking after the animals. I'm pretty good at shoeing horses, and shearing sheep. I've done that for a wee bit. I planted some crops. Have you ever had tomatoes? I'm great with the tomatoes. Beetroot, nah. Potatoes, of course, we haven't discovered them yet lately. This is just nonsense. Literally, the boat's about to break up. These guys have been crying out to their gods. They're all expecting to die at any point. And they're just asking this guy, who's responsible for the trouble? What kind of work do you do? Where'd you come from? What's your country? From what people are you? Very expansive. Where'd you come from? Well, I don't know if you know. Well, of course, okay, right. Let me draw a map. Right, here's the Mediterranean. Yeah, right. Nineveh. Yeah, I was supposed to be going there. Remember Joppa, where we well. Now, if you go down about half an hour, just about there, but then another half an hour. All right. I think I went there on my holidays one year. Utter nonsense. If you think this guy is responsible for it, you're just going to say, right. What are we going to do? What can we do? You're not going to ask him questions like, what do you do for a job? Where do you come from? What's your country? And from what people are you? Well, okay, let me go back. Right, let me go back to, there was this guy called Abraham. It's just nonsense. It's just, these people expecting to die any moment and they're wanting to know this guy's back history, where he comes from and what job he does. It's just bonkers. So anyway, he answers, he's very succinct with his answer here. I'm a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. You don't have to put that bit in. Why do you need to put in? He made the sea and the dry land. It's just bizarre. Anyway, so this terrified them. I don't know why. Why would this terrify them? This terrified them. They said, what have you done? Because maybe this guy, maybe Jonah's saying, my God's the best God ever. He made everything. And they thought, shit, we're dealing with a God, this guy's God, who made everything, including the storm that we're seeing at the moment. So this terrified them. They asked, what have you done? They knew he was running away from the Lord because he had already told them so. Well, not according to what I've just read. Well, if he did tell them, they knew he was running away from the Lord because he'd already told them. I don't understand this, because according to the story of Jonah, this is something new. According to this doesn't make any sense. So he goes to get the boat from Joppa and says to the captain, I want to go to Tarshish. Why? Because I'm running away from the God of the heavens and the earth, because he told me to go to Nineveh to preach against it because it's a wicked city, and I've decided to do completely the opposite. You think the captain would be, whoa, hold on a second. Well, that sounds a little bit naughty. You're talking about the God of the heavens and the earth. He's told you to do something, so you're going to my ship and you want to go to Spain the opposite way. I don't know, because maybe he'll still spot you on my ship and will create a violent storm to kill us all. You're not coming on my boat. Why don't you go to Skegness? Why don't you go to Skegness somewhere else? You're not coming on my boat. It doesn't make any sense. So apparently he'd already told them he was running away from the Lord. So, yeah, bit odd he was allowed on the boat in the first place. Or maybe that came in a conversation. Maybe when he was on the boat, having a chinwag with the guys, you know, when they're not casting lots and asking him his back history. But apparently he told them there. But at that point, I would have thought questions would have been asked at that point. You know, oh, so you know, it says here, so your Lord, your God, what sort of God is he, and where are you from? I would have thought these questions would have probably come up at an earlier date, you know, instead of in the middle of a violent storm. So the sea was getting rougher and rougher. What? Even more rougher than it already was, with the fact they've already chucked everything overboard and the ship's on the verge of breaking up. So they asked him, what should we do to make the sea calm down for us? And Jonah, I don't quite understand what Jonah's thinking is here, but his answer to this is to commit suicide. His answer is, the fact is he ran away, you know, because he was fearful of maybe the people in Nineveh maybe killing him, and now he's quite happy for the sailors, you know, to chuck him overboard. So he says, pick me up and throw me into the sea, he replied, and it will become calm. I know this is my fault and this great storm's come upon you. Well, that's absolute nonsense, Jonah. I'm sorry, because how do you know it's going to become calm? How do you even know that God has caused the storm in the first place? Because as it already says, that the great storms are known to happen in the Mediterranean. So why assume this? Odd. So, instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. So in other words, they decide, you know what, none of us want to throw you overboard. We're not bad people. We're going to make a valiant attempt to try and row back to land. Now, this is bizarre. How far away are they from Joppa at this point? Is the land 60 foot away? They're going to row. I don't know. It's just bizarre. How, you know, I would have thought the oars have already gone overboard. But anyway, well, they've been broken up in the violent storm. So it says here, but they couldn't because the storm grew even more wilder. My God, it's grown wilder since Jonah said it's me, and it's gone wilder even since they started rowing. So this must be the storm of all storms. So then so that's everybody on board, the other crowd, Lord, please, Lord, do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man. For you, Lord, have done as you please. Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. Now this is very, very similar, again, to so many things that happen in the Bible, where God doesn't directly kill somebody, but gets somebody else to do his dirty work. You know, talking about, for instance, what happened to Job, whereupon, you know, God allowed Job to be tempted. He wouldn't do it directly himself because he's a God of loving kindness and mercy, but said to Satan, you do what you like, just don't kill him. You know, flipping, you know, kill all his children, kill his servants, burn his house down, wreck his lands, cover him from head to toe in sores, send some people there to make him feel even more shittier than he's even feeling. I'm not doing this, but you can do it with my full blessing. Well, it's the same sort of thing. God doesn't want to take direct responsibility for throwing a man into the sea and drowning, but, you know, the sailors, you know, take upon themselves and say, we'll do it. So obviously God was quite happy with what the sailors had done. So they threw him overboard, and immediately he gets thrown into the sea grew calm. Well, in that case, if they've just thrown him aboard, imagine, Jonah gets thrown aboard, Jonah's aboard, Jonah's in the sea. All right, Jonah. Oh, shit. Fuck me. Blue sky, the sun, no rain. Jonah, come back on board. throw Jonah a bit of wood. Here's a rope. You know, here's a rubber dinghy. You know, there you go. Bizarre. Jonah goes overboard. He can't be that far away. Maybe he couldn't swim. I don't know. Maybe he couldn't swim. So anyway, the sea grew calm. At this, the men greatly feared the Lord. Greatly feared the Lord. I would have thought they were greatly fearing the Lord prior to that. I would have thought they were in greater fear of their own life when the storm was occurring. I would have thought they would be more grateful, but apparently, once the storm stopped, then they grew even more fearful of the Lord. Bizarre. It's amazing how much Jonah. If you go to, for instance, when you become a Jehovah's Witness, right? Imagine, for instance, you were brought up believing in, I don't know, in some religion in India where there's a whole plethora of gods. You know, there's a, you know, like a zebra's a god, and there's other animals like maybe you're a giraffe's a god. I know these in Africa, but I'm just taking the point because I don't have anything handy which is from India. You know, and or maybe you're worshipping something like that. You know, it's just a wee idol. You know, or maybe you're worshipping, you know, a horrific demon guy looking like that. I don't really know. But, or one of these obelisks, you know, with all these other gods in there. I don't know. So just imagine, for instance, that you were somebody brought up in a different religion. And then all of a sudden somebody talks to you from a Jehovah's Witness and said, look, I want to introduce you to my God. Pleased to meet you. Hope you know my name. It's Jehovah. And I want to introduce you to my God. And then you go through intensive studying, month after month, as you go through a Bible study trying to get to know this God. So you really get to know this God. But apparently, Jonah, in a very, very brief conversation, while a storm was going down, managed to persuade these guys that this God, you know, was the top God. You know, did he go through the whole thing about how you know, that they were brought out of Egypt and all this shenanigans and the flood, and I don't know how extensive and expansive this conversation was to convince these guys that, you know, this God of this Hebrew was the only true God. I don't know, but anyway, they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. Well, yet again, what did they? How did they offer sacrifice? Because, let's be honest with you, everything's gone overboard. All the cargo's gone. What did they offer as a sacrifice? I'm sure if there was a little lamb, he's gone overboard. I'm sure if there was a sheep, he's gone overboard as well. I'm sure if there was something bigger than a sheep or lamb, definitely gone overboard. Even if it was a fat person, you've gone overboard for buoyancy purposes. So I don't understand here what sacrifice these guys are making on the boat. I don't know, what is it, a bird? I don't know, a dead seagull that washed up. Maybe a big fish, oh no, not the big fish again. Maybe a little fish which washed up and hit the captain on the side of the face when he's downstairs talking to Jonah saying, why are you sleeping? I don't know, but how are they able to offer a sacrifice? And I don't know what vows he made to him. They've only just met him, you know, it's just a name, Jehovah, you know, Jehovah, or Yahweh, or who cares what his blinking name is. All of a sudden then, we're making vows, we're dedicating our lives to you, because we've just gone through a one-year Bible study. No, we just had a conversation with some guy that we just threw in the water. It's just bizarre. So, moving on to... we've been dealing with some ridiculous things so far. Let's go into the realms of pure fantasy, right? I'm not talking about Jason and the Argonauts, but I may as well be. So now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Well, there you go, there you go. A huge fish swallows Jonah. Now, all around the coast of the Mediterranean, these people survived probably through fishing. You know, the fishing was, a lot of people did fishing. A lot of people did fishing in the Mediterranean, and guess what? Even today, a lot of people still do fishing. A lot of people do fishing. So a fish as big as this was really unheard of in the Mediterranean. And I would have thought that these men who regularly went out there every day had seen the lot. I would have thought they'd seen everything that can be seen. But bizarrely, Nobody had seen a fish as big as this guy ever before, bizarrely. Strange, because back then, all the drawings that you get, all the people who relied from the fishing, for thousands of years, nobody draws or describes a fish as big as this. It's bizarre. But all of a sudden we have a fish, even prior to other scripts in the Bible, there's nothing as big as can swallow. For instance, if you look at anything, there's no pictures of either a great white shark or a sperm whale being drawn or carved or painted or talked of by any of the countries or tribes or peoples or civilizations based around the Mediterranean. This is the only instance of this huge fish, which we know can only be a great white shark or a sperm whale or something that's big enough to swallow a man, allegedly. So he's in the belly of this fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Okay, 3 days and 3 nights apparently. And while he's in there, while he's in the stomach of this, it must be the stomach, would have thought, because, for instance, if he was just trapped inside the mouth, imagine he was just trapped in the mouth of a whale. Imagine he was trapped inside the mouth of a whale. I would have thought every time that the whale went down, to take in more plankton, that poor old Jonah, because he didn't have any breathing apparatus, because he didn't have an oxygen tank on his back, which only lasts so many hours anyway, I would have thought he would have drowned every time. I would have thought every time the water would have come on, poor old Jonah would have drowned so many times, drowned. And just think of the effects that if you was swallowed by a whale, whales go down considerable depths. What about the pressures, as we know, that occurs to divers when they go down so many feet, that all of a sudden, the effects of the body, the oxygen in the blood, blah, 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 blah. Look it up. I would have thought he would have been affected by the pressures of the sea as he was going down, but apparently not. So if he's in the mouth of the whale, every time the whale opens the mouth, blah blah blah, water coming in. Anyway, I tell you what, let's go to the witnesses. Let's go to the Awake of 1981 to try and explain what's happening here. In the Awake of 1981, I'm sorry if you're still here, but we need to crack on with this one here, but this is quite important, so it's going to be a lengthy one, because we're going to come back to the end of why this is so important, whether this is a believable story or not. Now, in the Awake of 1981, I have printed it out, there's a thing called Jonah, a Fish Story. And it deals with 3 make-believe people talking about this very story. So I'm going to crack on. They're not all Jehovah's Witnesses, allegedly in this story, but I'm going to summarise anyway. The Bible says that Jonah was swallowed by a great fish and survived for parts of 3 days inside that creature. Critics of the Bible always point to this account as evidence that the Bible contains myths and allegories. Must a person be naive or foolish in order to believe the Bible account of Jonah? 3 teenage students are discussing the matter. Why don't we join them? Yes, please, because I just want to have 3 young people who are going to logically discuss this story. So let's crack on. We've got 3 people here. We've got Nancy, we've got Ron, Ron, and we've got Brad. One of these is a Jehovah's Witness. You've got to guess which one. So anyway, here we go. So Nancy cracks on. We studied about whales today in science class, and Mr. Dean really blasted the Bible. He said that the tale about Jonah and the whale is the biggest fish story ever told. A fishy tale. In other words, a story hard to swallow. Ron, did he say why he feels that way? Nancy, he said that whales don't eat people. They eat plankton, which is microscopic. So most whales don't have throats big enough to swallow a person. Now, I don't know what to think. Oh dear, Nancy must be absolutely... I can't sleep tonight now. Enter Brad. No, not enter Brad into Nancy. Calm down now. Enter Brad. So what? I believe the Bible, but I don't believe the story about Jonah. My minister says it's just an allegory anyway. So clearly, Brad isn't a Jehovah's Witness, because minister... blah blah blah, just an allegory anyway. An allegory really is just a story that's it's probably not true, and an allegory means it's just a way of trying to tell a moral story in a setting that is completely make-believe. A bit like the Good Samaritan story that allegedly Jesus told. Never really happened, it was just a story he told, you know, his parables or whatever. So this is a similar story here. Well, so Nancy cracks in, well, it bothers me. My preacher, so clearly Nancy's not the Jehovah's Witness, my preacher says we have to believe every word in the Bible and take it all literally, or else we aren't good fundamentalists. So in other words, Nancy belongs to one of those groups of religion which everything in the Bible is literal. You know, every date, every time, every span of aging is literal. But Mr. Dean sure makes it hard to believe Jonah was swallowed by a whale. So, Ron, I think we know at this point, Ron's probably the Jehovah's Witness. Ron, you know, I've read that there's one type of whale that could swallow Jonah. Gasp! Who? The sperm whale. It is said to be the only whale with a gullet large enough to swallow a man. Nancy, I didn't know that. Ron, sperm whales eat more than plankton. In fact, they seem to prefer cuttlefish. And squid. One sperm whale was found with a 35-foot long giant squid in its stomach. Nancy, but Mr. Dean said that even if a whale could have swallowed Jonah, there are no whales in the Mediterranean Sea. Oh my God! Well done, Nancy, for spotting the fundamental flaw in the sperm whale story. And that is where Jonah was swallowed. Ron, the Jehovah's Witness. It's true that whales are rare in the Mediterranean. But whale skeletons have been found there. Of course, the sperm whale is not the only candidate here. Let me show you in the Bible. So clearly Ron is the Jehovah's Witness because he's on hand as all Jehovah's Witnesses with his Bible, you know, or, you know, these days on hand with their little tablet, whatever. So we're seeing what's happening here. So basically, Ron's coming up with the sperm whale as a candidate. Nancy's correctly told Ron, guess what, you don't find sperm whales in the Mediterranean. They are so rare. You know, you've got chances of probably finding a mermaid more than a sperm whale in the Mediterranean. As I said before, if sperm whales were a regular feature in the Met, they would have been described and drawn. There would have been something going back the thousands of years that fishermen have been fishing in the Med before maybe we wiped them all out. I don't know, but that's my point. So Brad goes, always prepared, Ron. A little bit of combo there. Ron, you're always prepared. Ron, I try to be. Now it says it, Jonah 1:17, Jehovah appointed a great fish to swallow Jonah. Brad, so what's the difference? Ron, a fish could be any large sea creature like a shark. So we're on to the potential great white here. So Nancy, are there sharks large enough to swallow a person whole? Ron, the Jehovah's Witness. The great white shark is plenty large enough. In some cases it grows to be 40 feet long. Unlike the sperm whale, which is not usually aggressive, the great white is known for its ferocity and tendency to eat anything its way. For instance, and then it goes, Ron says, the Australian Zoological Handbook says the great white shark could easily swallow a man whole. Right, okay. So Brad comes up, Brad here, who's the guy who doesn't believe that all the Bible stories should be taken literally, says, but is the great white shark in the Mediterranean? Ron, the Jehovah's Witness, authorities agree that it is found in all seas of the world, including the Mediterranean. Some reports, experts report that it is known to follow ships for days on end, eating whatever is thrown aboard. Do you remember what happened to Jonah's ship before the seamen were persuaded to throw him overboard? Nancy, they tried to lighten the ship, didn't they? Yes. This is Ron. Ron, yes. See here, there came to be a great tempest on the sea and he kept hurling out the articles that were in the ship to the sea in order to lighten it. So in other words, the point is, what they're saying is that as the sailors were throwing out, you know, the lambs and the sheep and the cattle and you know, obviously the great whites, which are really rare in the Mediterranean. Again, if the great whites were commonplace in the Med, sailors back then would have reported them. Sailors back then would have talked to them about this terrific beast with razor sharp teeth. So let's consider, if Ron is right, if you do Ron, if Ron is right here, and it was a great white that followed this boat because they were throwing out lambs and sheep and God knows what else, You know, in fact, they've thrown out all the livestock, so heaven knows what they made the bloody sacrifice of. So if he was doing that anyway, probably the fish would have been well full up before Jonah got chucked overboard. So even if Jonah got chucked overboard, and again this great white swallowed him, those teeth are razor sharp. Yes, a whale, you know, it doesn't have the razor sharp teeth, but the great white shark, you know, they do tend to rip their prey to bits, you know, absolutely. You've ever seen what a great white, have you ever seen his teeth? Have you ever seen, you know, when people have been, you know, torn by, it's, let's just say, yeah, poor old Jonah would have probably not got past the teeth stage without having lost a limb. And then where did he go? You know, from the mouth to the stomach is the esophagus. How big is that? In a whale, it's really small. You know, probably in a shark, it's maybe a little bit bigger. But again, you know, we're just in the realms of, it's Jason and the Argonauts again here. So let's go. So Nancy says, so Jonah was swallowed by a great white shark. Wrong. Jonah was possibly swallowed by a great white shark. The sperm whale also is a possibility, although the shark seems more likely. Oh, now here's a really good one. This is the way here that Ron, you do Ron, gets past all the problems of there not being a sperm whale in the med, the great white being really rare, the teeth of a great white, the small esophagus, the water coming in from the whale, and the problem that we have that we haven't talked about, obviously. It's even if you manage to survive getting past the teeth, even if you got through a very narrow esophagus, even if you got into the stomach of either the shark or the sperm whale, you do have the problem that with inside the stomach of these beasts, which they weren't aware of back then, they're missing a few key ingredients. One of them is water to survive. You know, no water for 3 days. Salt water, plenty of salt water, probably drowning you every time, you know, they swallow again. But the problem is there is no oxygen. There is no oxygen. Yes, these animals are not known to to the appropriate mixture of oxygen and other chemicals that a man would need to breathe. No oxygen. How is Jonah going to survive in the stomach of either a great white shark or a sperm whale? Potentially water come on board all the time, drowning him, no oxygen, and then even if, you know, there's hardly any water coming on, let's even say that there is oxygen. Let's say he's in an oxygenated bubble in the stomach of one of these guys, and there's no water coming in. The problem is he is in the stomach of one of these creatures, and of course these creatures' stomachs are designed to break down flesh and even bone flesh. So that's what they do. So notice his body would have been attacked at the moment by all the acid within the stomach of these two creatures. So basically he would have looked worse than Job, minus the oxygen and minus any water. He was buggered. There's no way in God's name that he could have survived, even if he got past the teeth, the esophagus. He's in the stomach, he ain't surviving. This is Jason and the Argonaut stuff. So let's crack on. But the way to get around this is Ron says here, Jonah was possibly swallowed by a great white shark. The sperm whale is also a possibility, although the shark seems more likely. It is even possible that God used some huge sea creature, wait for it, that has never ever been found by science. Well, there you go, Jack Cousteau, if you're still with us, you know, Attenborough, he's still definitely with us. Just go to the Med and let's find this animal, this huge fish, which possibly swallowed Jonah. It's never been sighted ever before. It's never been discovered. There's no fossilised remains. There's no body that's been swept up onto a beach in the Med and everybody's going, my God, this is a new creature to science. It is huge. It is the size of a sperm whale. It's never been spotted in 6,000 years. There's no carcasses. There's no nothing. There's no drawings of it. There's no engraving of it. There is nothing at all. But bizarrely, maybe God used a creature that did have a stomach, which had oxygen in it, which stopped water coming in it, which didn't have an acid in it to attack its flesh. And this creature has never ever been discovered by science. Unbelievable. This is what they're saying in 1981, not 1881. This is 1981 awake, that the witnesses are putting out that maybe there's an animal we don't know of. So anyway, well, that's it really. I don't know where else to go on this. You know, it goes on to say how could Jonah have survived. You know, but basically they say, certainly Jonah needed a miracle to survive inside the fish that swallowed him. Yes, this is the problem. This is the problem. He would have needed a miracle to survive living in a fish, or a fish that, or a creature we haven't discovered, or a sperm whale, or a great white. He would have required a miracle to survive. Now, the thing about it is that this story of Jonah is applied later on. Because it says here, talking about Jesus, Ron says, Jesus apparently didn't think so, that this was just a story. Look what he said at Matthew 12:40. For just as Jonah was in the belly of the huge fish 3 days and 3 nights, so the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth 3 days and 3 nights. So in other words, Jesus, if we believe in Jesus, Jesus believed the story of Jonah. Jesus believed the story of Jonah. Okay? And what Ron's saying is, if we believe Jesus was factual, Jesus believed that this really happened. So if it's good enough for Jesus, it should be good enough for us. And that's what he's saying. And it refers to Matthew 12:41, talking about what happened to Nineveh, the judgment upon the generation. They repented, but something more than Jonah's here. So in other words, Jesus referenced Jonah, saying that what he was going to do, that there'd be a very similar 3 days, that what he was going to do would be bigger than what was going to happen with Nineveh in repenting. And this is where, going back to what I said at the beginning about being awake, because Jonah apparently 3 days later was vomited out into dry land. How this creature managed to vomit him out in dry land where he clearly can't swim. It probably would have, for a whale to do that, a shark vomited out, it probably would have got to a point that it probably would have beached himself. The whale would have committed suicide. But anyway, basically it's simple. Let's get this. That's the Witnesses version. This is the Bible version. Let's just think about this. It's quite simple. If we come at Jehovah's Witnesses after reading stories like that, and we think that the Jehovah's Witnesses have got the wrong end of the stick, that they've reinterpreted the Bible incorrectly, but then we've then said, right, we're now awake, but you still then go back to believing that, yeah, the Bible's true, the Bible's right, I still believe in God, I'm going to go to another faith. Well, you aren't truly awake, because if you are happy to believe a story like Jonah, why don't you believe in Jason the Argonauts? Why don't you believe in Poseidon and Medusa and the Golden Fleece? Why don't you believe those as well? Because that story of Jonah and the whale comes from the same imagination of people that imagine, there are fantastic beasts and they do fantastic things and miraculous things can happen from beasts that science, the beasts that scientists have never even discovered yet. Jack Cousteau, you let us down there badly, mate. It's just nonsense. When we have to go to things, it must have been a miracle. That's always the way with people who want to believe in the Bible. Let's just do logic. We can't always go to the failsafe always of that Jonah survived it in the fish because it was a miracle. The thing is, I've said this before, is Jesus referenced Jonah, which that story is so hard to swallow, you may as well reference Jason the Argonauts, it's probably more believable. Jesus referenced Noah, which we know the flood. It's just impossible. There's no way that all the creatures that we see all over the world, all the insects, can be where they are today if they all originated from Turkey. It's impossible. So in other words, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, it's quite simple. If you've awoken out of Jehovah's Witnesses, but you still believe that the Bible is the Word of God, I'm sorry, when you read a story like Jonah and the Whale, which completely is myth and legend and is impossible and is a lot of nonsense, and then you still say, oh, you know, I believe in Jesus, you know, save my sins, blah, 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 going to heaven now instead of the earth. Well, Jesus referenced Jonah as well. Jesus referenced Jonah. So if we're getting one guy we're supposed to believe in referencing a story which is impossible. Maybe back in the times in Jesus' day, maybe it would have been seen a little bit possible, because back in the times of Jesus' day, you know, we're still we're just coming out the Greek gods taken over by the Roman gods, even up into even maybe 2,000 years later, you know, 1,000 years later with the Vikings, even modern day times, people believe in all sorts of guys are gods. So back then, in the time of Jesus, maybe, you know, that story of the fish, magical fish, maybe it was more believable. But nowadays, we know it's not believable at all. So in other words, if you've come out and you're awake, but you've still gone back into believing the Bible is true and the story of Jesus is still true, think very seriously. If Jesus believed in Jonah, how can you believe, how does the character of Jesus come out credible when that story is complete nonsense? So you can't be fully awake if you've gone back to believing that the Bible is a story, a book full of things that really happened. They can't have. It's just the same as all the parables, all the myths and all the legends, you know, from God knows from the time memorial that we still have today. Jonah the Whale, Jonah the Big Fish is just another story, and it's just compounded the fact that Jesus Christ referenced that. And so us today, we should be able to look at the story and cast severe doubt on anything you read in the Bible. You can't cherry pick the bits you think true, not true, literal, not literal. You can't do that. Let's just accept that the Bible is written by a bunch of guys over a bunch of years, and it's all just come out of their head. And let's not try to base our lives and our hopes and our futures on anything in that book. Anyway, that's the story of Jonah and the whale, and certainly it is a hard story to swallow. Completely impossible. In fact, I fancy watching Jason the Argonauts right now. A more believable story. I love that bit where, you know, where Poseidon comes up and stops the things crumbling. It's a great bit. Anyway, see you later. Bye bye.